good evening, everybody. I wanted to talk for a moment about a scandal that people have been talking about on social media recently. A fellow named Michael Che, I believe is his name, is on Saturday Night Live. I mean, I remember when Norm Macdonald did that, and it was actually funny. And they kicked him off because they said his humor was too depressing and dark. And I'm not looking for Michael Che to lose his job. I don't care, and I'm not a big fan of the state of Israel, to be honest. My ideology aligns much more with the Satmar ideology. Maybe not 100%, but more or less, that's where my ideology is. Nonetheless, I think of that Seinfeld episode where Jerry Seinfeld is in the confession booth with the Catholic priest, and he talks about how Tim Watley converted to Judaism, and he thinks he converted just for the jokes. Now, I'm a big supporter of conversion to Judaism and converts to Judaism, so I'm a little offended by this routine, even though excuse me, usually I like to pause when we have a sneeze, but that one came too quickly. But even though it's offensive, it was funny, right? Sometimes things are offensive and they're still funny, right? And Seinfeld, he said, he told this to the priest, and the priest said, and this offends you as a Jewish person? He said, no, it offends me as a comedian. And here, Michael Che, as far as I know, maybe he's born Jewish, maybe he converted to Judaism. I don't make any assumptions about anybody. And most likely he's not Jewish. But and I wouldn't be surprised if the person who wrote this statement, I wouldn't call it a joke exactly, might be Jewish actually, because maybe the writer of the joke thought he could get away with it because he's Jewish. And I'll be honest, I don't think he really realized what he was saying. That pretty much accusing the state of Israel of being being discriminatory against the non-Jewish citizens, because maybe he just thinks everybody's Jewish in Israel. I don't know. But the truth of the matter is, like I said, like Seinfeld said, it offends me more as a comedian, even though I'm not a comedian, than as a Jewish person. Meaning, it's not funny. It's not a joke. How does that qualify as a joke, and why are people laughing at that? For those who don't know, I don't think I quoted what I hesitate to call a joke was, but pretty much he said, he plays a newscaster. If people don't know, President Trump always used the term fake news. The term fake news comes from Saturday Night Live from the 1970s. They would start off, when they did the Weekend Update, they would say, this is the fake news. And so people don't realize that was the term. And that's the origin of the term. But anyway, so he plays a news reporter on the Weekend Update, and he said that 50%, half of the Israeli population has been immunized for COVID-19. He said, I'm going to assume that that's the Jewish half. That's not funny. It's not a joke. It's just, I don't understand why anyone would find that funny, or why anyone would laugh at that, putting aside the fact that it's offensive. And to me, not as a Jewish person, but as a comedian. But not only that, like I said, I'm not a Zionist, I'm not a fan of the state of Israel. But the fact of the matter is, the state of Israel does not discriminate in those ways against its non-Jewish citizens. If anything, the biggest victims of Israel, of the state of Israel, of Zionism, are the Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox Jews, who are really, in a certain sense, I would consider them to be indigenous. They were there before the state. Many of those communities were there even before the Zionist movement began. So they might qualify under certain terms as indigenous in a way that the secularists and the Zionists would not. And they are the biggest victims of Israeli policies in the state of Israel. Even if they're not indigenous, they could be probably identified as conscientious objectors of many things. And very much like what the Chinese do to the Uyghurs, that's what the Israelis do to the ultra-Orthodox. They try to put them in re-education camps. That's really why they want to draft them in the army, not because they need more soldiers, but because the army is pretty much a concentration camp, a re-education camp to brainwash Jews to become Israelis. That's really what it's all about. But nonetheless, when it comes to healthcare and things like that, they don't discriminate against non-Jewish citizens. Now, people talk about the Palestinians, this and that, despite the fact that the Palestinians are not citizens of the state of Israel and often choose not to be the citizens of the state of Israel. Nonetheless, Israel has been helping the Palestinians with the COVID shots, but as far as the citizens of the state of Israel, 20% of which are Arabs, most of those are Muslims, many of them are Christians, they're receiving the shots equal to everybody else. So there's absolutely zero discrimination as far as healthcare in the state of Israel between Jews and non-Jews, and that's a fact. So, the Torah tells us midvar sheker tirchak, you have to stay very far away from a lie, and it's a lie to insult. There's enough truth about the state of Israel that's bad and evil that you don't need to lie, and that's a lie. When this guy was saying that something along the lines of that. He didn't say that the non-Jews are discriminated against. He said it's the Jewish half, which again, maybe he's not aware how large the non-Jewish population is in the state of Israel. But nonetheless, without putting that point aside of how it's offensive and false, etc., it's just not funny. And I don't understand. President Trump was right when he said that the Saturday Night Live stopped being funny decades ago. All right, it's time for me to get inside. I'm home. I really got to mail a letter, though. I'm trying to find an envelope. I might have some in the trunk. All right, thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe. Comment, hit the bell button, and we'll talk later. God bless.